Hello, buddy. All right. So, welcome to the Mikestand. Today is Tuesday, June 17th, 2025. Hopefully, everybody's having a good week thus far. Um, so, we're going to give people a chance to come in, obviously, before we get started. If you haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. But actually, looks like we do have some people in here, so well, we did at least. I was thinking of getting started right away here, but I guess we'll wait 1 minute, see if that um, see if that count kind of comes back up. Oh, let's see. Hopefully, everybody's enjoying their summer holidays here. Um, all right, so let's see now. All right, so well, today I did watch some stuff from April of 1938. The first, of course, in the new Universal cartoon series that replaced Oswald Rabbit for Universal. All right, so we got 4 people in here now. So, all right, so here's what's on tap for tonight. I'm going to go right into this. So tonight, I couldn't find anything news-wise. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a little profile piece tonight. We're going to look back to the company of Screen Gems. Started out as Charles Mintz Productions. We're going to, of course, it went through a number of different iterations. It started out as an animation studio, and then went to being a television subsidiary. Of course, you probably remember a lot of the 60s and 70s stuff. Usually, the were the television distributors for a lot of stuff like Hanna-Barbera and all that. But the portion of the Screen Gems history we're going to be looking at today is their history as an animation studio. Basically from its very beginnings to up until like 1942, I believe, as an or 1949 as an animation studio. Look back at some of the of course, the series that they were involved in producing under Charles Mintz and all that, and the history of it. So, plus, of course, we'll have the wrestling wrap up. We'll look back to last night's Raw as WWE is continuing to prepare for its Night of Champions event next Saturday. Not this Saturday, next Saturday. So let me make that correction too. I think I said this Saturday last night, but it was actually next Saturday. Also this week, AEW along with Ring of Honor and Mexico's CMLL will be co-producing events down in Mexico over the next few nights. Tomorrow night, of course, AEW will be having its Grand Slam Mexico event, and then Friday. So we'll be looking at what's going to be going on tonight's event, co-produced event. And then, of course, we'll wrap things up with this day in Niche history at the end of the show. So, with all that being said, why don't we go ahead and get started? So, as I said, what we're going to do tonight is we are going to look back at some history from Screen Gems. Most notably, of course, I'm going to focus in on their animation, their history as an animation studio. So let's go through this. And as I said, if you haven't already, you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream. See if we can get some more friendly people to engage. That'd We appreciate it. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions. I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. With that being said, let's get to this then. So, Screen Gems is an American film production company owned by Sony Pictures Entertainment, a subsidiary of the Japanese conglomerate Sony Group Corporation. Screen Gems has served several different purposes for its parent companies over the decades since its inception, initially as a cartoon studio, then a television studio, and later on as a film studio. Screen Gems currently serves as a Sony's film production division that specializes in genre films, mainly horror. Screen Gems is currently one of the 5 live-action labels of the Sony Pictures Motion Picture Group, alongside Columbia Pictures, TriStar Pictures, Sony Pictures Classics, and 3000 Pictures. And Columbia Pictures, and of course, Screen Gems has had a long history with Columbia. So here we go. So this is the part we're going to focus in on tonight. Animation. Screen Gems has an animation studio from 1921 to 1949. So basically, about 28 years there. All right. So let's get into this then. When producer Pat Sullivan came to Harry Warner to sign a contract with him on his and Otto Messmer's series Felix the Cat, he declined and instead told his soon-to-be former secretary, Margaret J. Winkler, that she should form her own company and take control of the distribution of the series. Winkler formed M.J. Winkler Productions, and soon also took control of Max and Dave Fleischer's series out of the Inkwell. Now, this is back in the 20s, of course, and we've seen, you've seen on some of my, niche history segments, we've seen, when some of these Felix of the Cat series came out in the mid-20s there. By 1923, she and Sullivan were arguing, and that same year, the Fleischer brothers formed their own distribution company named Red Seal. Winkler saw an unreleased short called Alice's Wonderland, a cartoon produced and directed by Walt Disney. Of course, prior to forming his own studio, he was producing the Alice comedies, or I think as part of his original studios before Mickey Mouse. Producing Walt Disney was there, and became impressed with the short. The two agreed to make a series about the cartoon. In 1924, Charles Mintz married Winkler, and the latter's career began to decline. Mintz quickly assumed Winkler's role in the company, later rebranding it Winkler Pictures. Let's see. All right. In 1925, Winkler's renewal contract for the Felix shorts was written, yet Winkler declined to renew due to her dispute with Sullivan. The following year, the Alice comedies stopped being distributed by Winkler after Mintz became involved with the progress. It was clear that Disney was unhappy with the production costs on cartoons, and he asked Disney and Ub Iwerks to develop a new character. The result was Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, the first animated character for Universal Pictures. In February 1928, when the character proved more successful than expected, Disney sought to meet with Mintz over the budget, wanting to spend more on the cartoons. Mintz refused and hired away all of Walt Disney Studios' animators except iWorks, Les Clark, and Johnny Cannon, who all refused to leave Disney. He moved the production of the Oswald cartoons to Winkler Pictures, along with Margaret Winkler's brother, George. After losing the Oswald contract to Walter Lantz, Mintz focused on Crazy Cat, in parentheses here, a character from a comic strip by cartoonist George Herman, which was the output of a Winkler distributed property. M.J. Winkler Productions became known as Winkler Pictures after Mintz took over in 1926 and partnered with Columbia Pictures for distribution in 1929. In 1931, when the studio moved from New York to California, it was renamed Charles Mintz Studio. Now, as I said, Screen Gems, or by this time in 1931 known as Charles Mintz Studios, had a very long history with Columbia Pictures. Anyways, I do need to step away from the computer for a moment, so I'll be right back. But I'll put some music on for you guys while I'm gone. I'll be right back. Right, I'm back. So let's get back to the article here, the profile article here. Becoming Screen Gems, 1933 to 1942. The Charles Mintz Studio became known as Screen Gems in 1933. The name was originally used in 1933 when Columbia Pictures acquired a stake in Charles Mintz's animation studio. The name was derived from an early Columbia Pictures slogan, quote, "Gems of the Screen," unquote, itself a takeoff on the song, quote, "Columbia, the Gem of the Ocean," unquote. Mintz was nominated for 2 Academy Awards for Best Short Subject. His first nomination was in 1935 for Holiday Land, which was a Color Rhapsody, which was part of the Color Rhapsody series. I believe that was the one That was one. I think that was one of, if not, I think that was. I know that Scrappy was in that one. I believe that was his only color appearance. Scrappy, one of the characters that Mintz had produced, and he was nominated again in 1937 for The Little Match Girl. For about a decade, Charles Mintz produced Crazy Cat, Scrappy, and Color Rhapsodies, animated short series for Columbia Pictures. Yes, Crazy Cat and Scrappy would come to an end in 1939. Color Rhapsody would continue on until 1949. Um, let's see. Also, between 1937 and 1940, several Color Rhapsody films were subcontracted to Ub Iwerks with the use of his own animation studio. The studio's color cartoons were well received, while some other cartoons were not. Mainly the later Crazy Cat and Scrappy shorts. Animator Isidore Klein was particularly frustrated with the Crazy Cat cartoons as it bear little resemblance to Herman's comic strip by the mid 1930s. In parentheses, despite attempting to make a more faithful cartoon with the 1936 short Little Angel, which Klein was disappointed by the final product, parentheses. Furthermore, Columbia gave Mintz strict financial obligations where they advance a certain amount of money, resulting Mintz repeatedly running into cost overruns. In 1939, after becoming indebted to Columbia and suffering from declining health, Mintz relinquished ownership of his studio and the Screen Gems name to Columbia to settle long-standing financial problems. He would later pass away on December 30th, 1939, from a heart attack. Crazy Cat was discontinued the following year, while Scrappy cartoons ended a year after that. Let's see now. And again, if you guys haven't already, if you guys can help out by liking and sharing the stream, see if we can get some more friendly people to engage, I'd be appreciated. Also, if anything here grabs your attention, feel free to comment and or ask questions, and I'll try to answer the questions to the best of my ability. So, with all that being said, let's continue on here. By 1940, Columbia would oversee management of the studio following ownership. The studio's production manager, Jimmy Bronis, became the studio head, but was shortly replaced by Mintz's brother-in-law, George Winkler. The following year, Columbia decided to hire Frank Tashlin, previously a writer for Walt Disney Productions and director for Leon Schlesinger Productions. So basically Walt Disney, which was being distributed by RKO at that point. Leon Schlesinger was, of course, Warner Brothers. As a studio head instead, Tashlin had a profound effect on the studio as he planned to revitalize it to greater heights. There, he would hire many displaced animators from the 1941 Disney animator strike, as well as making the decision of firing the bulk of their initial in-house staff, in parentheses here, including Arthur Davis, Manny Gold, Lou Lilly, Ben Harrison, and Winkler. Ben Harrison would go on to work for Walter Lantz, of course, on a number of the Woody Woodpecker cartoons. He would also direct the short The Fox and the Grapes, based on the Aesop fable of the same name. The short would inadvertently spawn Columbia's most successful characters, the Fox and the Crow, a comic duo of a refined fox as Streetwise Crow. Tashlin was later replaced by Ben Schwab as producer in April 1942, but continued to work there as a creative supervisor. Now, mind you, I believe the Fox and Crow was even made into a comic, but this is one of the occasions where the cartoon spawned the comic, as opposed to the other way around, as we've normally seen. A comic spawning a cartoon. So, anyways, we continue on here. Decline and closure, 1942 to 1949. So, Tashlin proved to be very influential to his staff, as he allowed and encouraged them to pursue the wildest of ideas under his supervision. However, his stay at Screen Gems would be short-lived, as he would later leave the studio in June following an argument with Columbia higher-ups. When interviewed by Michael Barrier, he said that the management, quote, can't stay happy long when things are going well, so we ended up in another fracas and I left, unquote. He was replaced by Dave Fleischer, in parentheses, who produced the 1942 World War II short Song of Victory under Tashlin's supervision, unparenthesed, previously the co-founder and head supervisor of Fleischer Studios. John Hubley described Fleischer as being very detached from his employees, calling him, quote, one of the world's intellectual lightweights, unquote. He was also known for editing completed cartoons in a way that broke continuity. He was later fired and succeeded by a revolving door of producers, including musician Paul Worth, Three Stooges producer Hugh McCullum, and ex-Schlesinger assistants Ray Capps and Henry Binder. The studio would also create several more recurring characters around this time, including Tito and his burrito. Now, in this case, the term burrito here is just a Spanish word for little burro or little donkey, basically. It's not the Mexican. It's not the Mexican treat that we all like to eat at like Taco Bell or Del Taco. It's Tito and burrito. The burrito is the Spanish word for little donkey. So, Flippy, Flop the cat, Igor Puzzlewitz, Willoughby Wren, and an adaptation of Al Cap's comic series Little Abner, and with varying levels, as you said. Yeah, Little Abner, that cartoon, I think, only had a couple episodes. That came out in 1944. Let's see now. Tashlin's departure had an immediate effect to the studio in a direction standpoint, with animation historians noting that the quality of their cartoons had declined soon after. Film historian Leonard Maltin claimed that after Tashlin left, the studio, quote, tried to maintain some spirit on screen with varying results. Screen Gems cartoons of the 1940s feature some of the least endearing cartoon characters ever created and suffer from misguided story direction, unquote, which was seen in shorts such as Mass Mouse Meeting, 1943, and Giddy Yapping, 1944. Hubley, who went on to direct Professor Tall and Mr. Small, He can't make it stick, and The Rocky Road to Ruin, all 1943, with Paul Summer. Summer, and to have disliked his work at the studio, and that Columbia hated, quote unquote, the cartoons they were making. Cap was also reportedly displeased with the quality of the Little Abner cartoons, which was discontinued after 5 cartoons. Okay, so I thought it was 2 or 3, but he got up to 5 at least. So, in short, produced by Katz and Binder were criticized for being quote pale carbons of the Warner Brothers shorts, unquote, to the point of creating characters strikingly similar in appearance to Sylvester the Cat and Daffy Duck. In addition to Taslin's departure, many of the ex-Disney animators that he hired also left for other studios. The inability to hire and maintain more experienced directors and storymen, as well as Columbia's mismanagement, were also argued as the other key factors to the studio's diminished quality. Some staff members during this period included Bob Wickersham, Alec Geis, Sid Marcus, one of the few pre-Taslin artists who stayed with the. Sid Marcus would go again. Another guy went on to work for Walter Lantz in the 50s. Howard Swift and Alex Lovey. Alex Lovey, of course, another guy who went to Walter Lantz. Bob Clampett was also brought in as a gag writer before setting up his own brief animation studio for Republic Pictures. While Looney Tune writers Michael Maltese and Ted Pierce were said to have moonlighted for a few cartoons. Screen Gems was, in an attempt to keep costs low, the last American animation studio to stop producing black and white cartoons. The final black and white Screen Gems shorts appeared in 1946, over 3 years after the second longest holdout, Famous Studios. Over 3 years after the second longest, Famous Studios, and Leon Schlesinger production. Now, Famous Studios was the studio that basically took over from Fleischer. They basically bought out the rights to like the Popeye and Superman cartoons by like the early 40s there. So during that same year, Columbia, still dissatisfied with the studio's output, decided to shut the doors for good, continuing to release remaining shorts until 1949. The studio name was later repurposed for a television division, while former Seward Street facility, which Screen Gems occupied since 1940, was taken over by Walter Lantz Productions in 1947. So, the Screen Gems Animation Studio legacy year. All right. The Screen Gems cartoons were regarded as one of varying quality, comparable to those produced by Famous Studios and Terry Toons. Terry Toons was, of course, the company that gave us Farmer Alfalfa, Mighty Mouse, Heckle and Jekyll, those characters. In spite of the studio's internal affairs, the Screen Gems cartoons were still moderately successful, with 3 more cartoons achieving Academy Award nominations. Cartoons produced and supervised by Tashlin were also praised for his attempts at revitalizing the studio. However, Screen Gems never achieved a level of success comparable to Walt Disney Production, Warner Brothers, Walter Lantz, and MGM Cartoon Studio. The studio's purpose was assumed by an outside producer, United Productions of America, UPA, whose cartoons, including Gerald McBoing and Mr. Magoo series, were major critical and commercial success. Following UPA, a deal with Hanna-Barbera was made in 1957 lasted until 1967. In 1999, Columbia TriStar International Television produced Totally Tuned In, a syndicated TV package showcasing Columbia's classic cartoon library, which you can now watch on MeTV Tunes. Um, you know, with through most notably on Sunday nights at Sunday nights, Monday mornings, 12 midnight, 9 Pacific. So, with the aid of animation historian Jerry Beck, Columbia restored and remastered the majority of the color Screen Gem cartoons, as well as all the UPA cartoons from the original 35mm elements. The show aired in several international markets before making the American television debut on Antenna TV on January 8, 2011. They would later be aired on Tune In With Me on the MeTV2 network in November 2021. Despite these restoration efforts, Sony Pictures Home Entertainment has no current plans to release these shorts on DVD or Blu-ray. Since CPE Holdings Incorporated became dormant on May 9, 2024, Sony Pictures Releasing now owns the theatrical distribution on behalf of Columbia Pictures, while Sony Pictures Television owns the television distribution on behalf of CPT Holdings Incorporated to the majority of the color Screen Gem cartoons, as well as all the UPA cartoons. So here are all like the theatrical short film series that were produced by Charles Mintz Productions. Hey, Metal, thanks for popping in. So here are all like the series that Screen Gem Charles Mintz Productions had a hand in producing. All series were distributed by Columbia unless otherwise noted. So from 1925 to 1939, Crazy Cat, which they inherited from Bray Productions. From 1928 to 1929, Oswald the Lucky Rabbit. They came from Disney and then moved on to Walter Lantz. Toby the Pup in 1930 and 31. They were distributed by RKO Radio Productions, which later, of course, distributed the Disney series. Scrappy from 1931 to 1939. Color Rhapsodies from 1934 to 1949. Barney Google, which is based, of course, on the comic strip from 1935 to 1936. Fables from 1939 to 42. Fantasies from 1939 to 1948. Fox and the Crow from 1943 to 1946. Lavender 1944. And then Flippy from 1945 to 1947. So that's all for the animation studio history of Screen Gems. That's all we were going to cover for tonight. So now what we're going to do, of course, we're going to go ahead and move on to the wrestling wrap up, as we do have quite a bit to go over there. Last night's Raw, tonight's NXT, as well as going over what's going to be going down in Mexico, as you have Ring of Honor and CMLL doing a show down in Mexico with AEW talent as well. Let me just go. First off, we're going to go back to last night's Raw, of course. So on last night's Monday Night Raw, as WWE held its Monday Night Raw event from the Resch Center in Green Bay, Wisconsin, Michael Cole and Corey Graves on comedy. Corey Graves replacing Pat McAfee this week. as I said earlier, they're preparing for the they're continuing to build towards the Night of Champions event in Saudi Arabia next Saturday, the 28th. The opening match saw Asuka, who made her in-ring return to the WWE, advance in the Queen of the Ring match in the first round fatal 4-way match over Ivy Nile, Raquel Rodriguez, and Stephanie Verkier. As of course Raquel Rodriguez, her plans to advance were thwarted by Rhea Ripley, potentially building up on the feud there going into the Evolution pay-per-view, the potential matchup there. AJ Styles defeated JD McDonough in a singles match as Intercontinental Champion Dominic Mysterio and Judgment Day's teammate Dominic Mysterio tried to interfere on JD and then of course Finn Balor after the match would come out. They'd all try to jump Styles only for Styles. Basically, Styles, basically making a play that he's coming after the Intercontinental Championship. Kairi Sane defeated Liv Morgan by referee's decision when Liv Morgan injured her shoulder, dislocated it during the match. May be that she's out, and they were just starting a program. Early in the night, she had a confrontation with Women's World Champion Kairi Sane. Looked like they were possibly starting a program there. There was also a program in which Liv Morgan was starting a program with Nikki Bella. With the possibility, I think, one of the Bella twins, basically, but now that's been placed on hold before we can find out just how bad the injury is. Liv Morgan and Raquel Rodriguez, who are the women's tag team champions, will possibly have to vacate those titles if it's established that she's going to be out for some extended period of time. And in the main event, saw the men's qualifying fatal 4-way with Jey Uso advanced over Bronson Reed, Rusev, and Sheamus. After the match, Seth Rollins came out looking to try to go after, only for Cody Rhodes to come in and make the save. So that's all that happened on last night's Monday Night Raw. So now let's look ahead to tonight's NXT. We look ahead to tonight's NXT event coming from the Performance Center in Orlando, Florida, on the CW. There's basically a number one contendership tournament going on for the NXT Women's Champion. You have 4 matches with the 4 winners of these matches will be meeting next week to determine the number one contender. So these 4 singles matches are Lash Legend taking on Kalani Jordan, Thea Hall taking on Jada Parker, Izzy Dame taking on Zarya, and Jordan Grace taking on Lola Vice. Winners of those 4 matches will meet in a fatal 4-way next week, determine the number one contender to the NXT Women's title, who will then go on to challenge JC Jane for that title at Evolution. And in the other match, in a 6-man tag match, TNA's Elijah will team up with Josh Briggs and Yoshiki Unamura to take on TNA's first class of AJ Francis and Casey Navarro and current TNA World Champion Trick Williams. Well, that's all we have of the WWE news. Now, as I said, we do have some other news going on tonight. Is I believe Ring of Honor and CMLL will be co-producing an event tonight from down in Mexico. So let me go find that. Actually, in fact, so on tonight's show, from let's see, as soon as I find it, as soon as I can grab it here. So, coming from Arena, Mexico, Mexico City Federal District, Mexico, Consuejo, CMLL, AEW, and Ring of Honor will be co-producing an event called CMLL Martes Populares. The opening match we'll see in a non-title match, Ring of Honor Women's World Television Champion Red Velvet taking on Persephone. Persephone, who I think is the current CMLL Women's World Champion. So battle of two title holders there in a non-title match. In a match for the CMLL World Tag Team Championships, champions Los Hermanos Chavez, Evangel de Oro, and Niebla Roja, the champions, will be answering the challenge of AEW's crew of Action Andretti and Leo Rush. Hologram will be taking on Neon in a singles match. AEW's Josh Alexander will be taking on Atlantis Jr. in a one-on-one match. The match that was set up, actually. And then in a trios match, you'll have on one side Averno, Hechicero, and Ultimo Guerrero taking on Don Callis family members of Kyle Fletcher, Rocky Romero, and Konosuke Takeshita. And in a match for the Ring of Honor World title, Bandito will be defending the title against Mascara Dorada, or the Golden Mask. So that's all I got for you guys on the wrestling wrap up. So we will be, of course, I'll be letting you guys know what happened on, of course, at the NXT and the Mexican show there tomorrow, as well as looking ahead to tomorrow night's event for AEW's Ring of Honor and CMLL. But now, with all that being said, now with today being Tuesday, June 17th, 2025, let's take a look back at this day in Nietzsche history. So, I find it here. 45, 55, 2005, and 2010. All right. So, first off, we're going to head back 80 years ago. As on this date, 80 years ago, back in 1945, on this date in 1945, the 35th issue of Terry Toons cartoons came out, went on sale on newsstands from Timely Comics, who we know of today as Marvel. Sold for 10 cents for 32 pages. Of course, you had, let's see, 2, 4, 6, had eight features altogether in there. Four of the stories were Gandy Goose, and he also had Oscar Pig, Andy Wolf, Glenn Claude, Penny Grabber, and Dinky. So, of course, Gandy Goose is one of the shorts that was produced by Paul Terry for 20th Century Fox. So on this date in 1945, 80 years ago today, 35th issue of Terry Toons Cartoons went on sale on this date back in 1945. So now with that being said, moving on to the next piece of Needs history, move ahead 10 years to 1955. As on this date in 1955, from the Atlanta Municipal Auditorium in Atlanta, Georgia, the main event saw Freddie Blassie successfully defend the NWA Georgia Southern Heavyweight title over Jerry Graham. The show started off with a match between Dick Brown and Larry Hamilton that ended in a disqualification that led to a tag team match between Brown and Aaron Drapp taking on Larry Hamilton and Eddie Gossett. Eddie Gossett, who was, of course, the real name of Eddie Graham. Brown and Drapp would eventually defeat Gossett and Hamilton in a tag team match there. So that happened 70 years ago today. That Georgia Championship Wrestling held an event at the Atlanta Municipal Auditorium in Atlanta, Georgia. So, now moving on to the next piece of Needs history. And we move ahead to the year 2005, which was only 20 years ago today. On this date in the year 2005, premiering on the Disney Channel, Walt Disney Television Animation's The Buzz on Maggie would premiere on this date back in 2005. So 20 years ago today, the Walt Disney Television Animation's Buzz on Maggie would premiere on the Disney Channel on this date back in 2005. And finally, on this date in 2010, 15 years ago today, on this date in 2010 here, 15 years ago today, Doga Koba's Shin Koshima Muso Otome Tyron would complete its run on Japanese television on this date back in 2000. Dagakobo's Shin Koyama Muso Otome Tyron would complete its run on Japanese television on this date back in 2010. It's based on a video game. That's all I got for you guys tonight. Let's see. That's all I got for you guys tonight. I hope everybody enjoyed the show. We'll be back here tomorrow with more Niche News, of course. And don't forget that this Sunday, I'll be joined by the Metal from the Vomitorium as we look back to comics that went on sale in May of 1940. We'll be looking at Street Smith. We'll be finishing up our May of 1940 coverage. So with that, I thank everybody for being here. And I hope to see everybody back here tomorrow. Bye. Oh yeah, don't forget tomorrow's hump day as well, so we'll be getting over the hump. All right. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.